from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm a little under the weather at the moment, but that was never, ever going to stop me from previewing what might be the biggest hockey game of my lifetime. Like, it's definitely in the conversation considering the circumstances around it. Like, the politics from the Canadian side, anyways, it's hard for me to speak as to what Americans might feel for Canadians at the moment. But from our perspective, it's like we don't hate you guys by any sort of the imagination, but we've got new tariffs on us, obviously, and your president seems to think that we're going to become a state. So it's kind of we're annoyed, but we don't hate you guys, which is the perfect amount of disdain for a sporting event. It shouldn't get out of control. It should be all fun and games, but there is a real sense of bite when it comes to Canada versus the US. And when you add in the fact that hockey is Canada's sport and the US are kind of trying to take that over in terms of the dominance of men's professional ice hockey, and they're talking about, taking us over in terms of the country. Like, there's a lot of underlying storylines to this. So I went back and I thought of the other biggest games of my lifetime, biggest hockey games, and I came up with three. So I have Canucks versus Boston, Game 7 in 2011. Obviously, this is big time to do with the fact that I'm from Vancouver. That game was all anyone could talk about for 2 days. It started a riot in our city, and it's still talked about to this day around here. I have Oilers versus Florida last year as one of the games on that list. Like, Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, coming back from down 3-0 in the Stanley Cup final against the Panthers. Like, that was a huge national story where the entire world really was looking towards hockey instead of the NBA, NFL, MLB like it usually does. And the 2010 gold medal game between the US and Canada, where the circumstances in that game were very similar to what they will be in this game. So if you remember, the storyline going into that game was actually incredibly similar to what's going on right now. So the US and Canada came into those Olympics as heavy favorites to win, but they were put in the same group, so they had to play one another just to get out of their brackets. The top two seeds advanced. So the US cruised in that bracket. They went 3-0 with actually a pretty convincing win against Canada in the group stage. While Canada flatly stumbled in the group play, they obviously lost to the US, and it took a shootout for them to beat Team Switzerland. So Canada looked like they were on their heels a little bit. And in the semis, it looked like more of the same. The US whooped Finland 6-1, while the Canadians barely beat Slovakia. They beat them 3-2. So even though Canada was the second best team in those Olympics throughout the whole thing, it looked like there was a pretty clear gap between number one and number two on that list. It looked like the States, with their 335 million people versus Canada's 40 million, had finally taken over. But we all know what happened in the finals. Canada found a way to win after the US tied the game with under 30 seconds left. Sidney Crosby scored the most iconic goal in Canadian history. Now, the past does influence the future, but it does not control it. I understand that this US team is very different than that 2010 US team, and this Canadian team is very different than that 2010 Canadian team. But just on the US side, this US team is way scarier than that 2010 team ever thought about being. Like, in 2010, I think you would be surprised at this. Their top scorers were in this order: Zach Parise, Brian Rafalski, Patrick Kane, I know him, Ryan Malone, and Jamie Langenbrunner. Now, I'm not saying those guys aren't absolute legends, but they're definitely not the household names that we see in the US top six nowadays. The US top scorers now are Eichel, Getzel, Matthew Tkachuk, Zach Werenski, and shout out to Boldy. He somehow made it into the top five. I guess in all of these international tournaments, there's just some random dude who ends up potting a couple points and secondary assists. But what's so crazy is those are their top scorers, clearly much better than their 2010 top end talent. And those aren't even their best scorers on paper. Like, I didn't mention Austin Matthews. I didn't mention Jack Hughes, who might be the best scorer on the team in general. So their forward core is flatly ridiculous. There's no doubt about it. And their bottom six is really, really solid in terms of checking and defense. But speaking of defense, their forward core hasn't even been their best unit this tournament. Like, their defense has been easily the best out of the entire Four Nations, and I could argue the best unit out of any of these Four Nations teams. Zach Werenski, because of Hughes's missed time, he's probably going to get the Norris this year. He's leading the league in minutes, and first of all, I want to touch on Quinn Hughes real quick. If he came, it would have felt fine for me, to be honest. Like, it's a best on best tournament. Everyone should have their best players. But it does seem a little, I don't know, scummy isn't the word, but it feels a little too cool for school. Like, just showing up for the finals when you didn't play for the rest of the tournament. Like, if I was, Sandstrom on US or whoever, one of their bottom-ish defensemen, I would feel some type of way about it. Like, I've been here from the start. I've been practicing with the team. I've been in the trenches with these guys. I helped beat Canada in the round robin. Now this guy's just going to come and play in the finals after all my hard work. I wouldn't feel great about that. But even without Hughes staying on track, like, the U.S. defense is unbelievable. How good has Jacob Slavin been? I think he's been even better than Werenski has been this tournament. He's logged the most minutes for them. He has been unbelievable in terms of his defensive stick, in terms of his ability to not let the other team's speed control the pace and push him back into his zone. He's been awesome at passing. And the great thing about the U.S. defense is their forwards complement their defense so well. Like, I can't get over the defense that the U.S. was able to play in that third period against Canada, because Canada, I think, had possession for like 15 of the 20 minutes in that third period. It wasn't even close. The US didn't even try to get possession in Canada's zone. They would clear the puck, dump the puck in, clear the puck. Their whole strategy was kill time, and they did it perfectly. With all of Canada's offensive firepower, they only had an expected goals for of 0.4 during the third period. They didn't even get an expected half a goal in a period where they had the puck for, I guarantee you, 75% of the time or more. Like, and that's a big part of their team, is that their forwards have awesome sticks. Matthews is so good defensively. He's been really quiet offensively, which has surprised me, but he's awesome as a two-way player. Eichel is awesome as a two-way player. And they've designed their bottom six to where pretty much everyone down there is a good checker. Add on to the fact that the guy shutting the door for all of these defensive talents is probably the best goalie in the world. He's definitely on track to win his second straight Vezina. And in this tournament, he's been really good. He didn't have to make any big saves against Canada. He played great against Finland. And right there between the pipes, the Canadians start with a huge disadvantage, because although I think Jordan Bennington has looked better in every single game than he did the previous game this tournament, I thought he was bad against Sweden. I thought he was fine against the US. And I thought he was actually pretty good against Finland. But why do we think we can trust him in a big game? Because no one really should? Because in the World Championships just last year, and Jordan Bennington has a bunch of great things going for him, which I'm going to get into in a second, but World Championships last year for Team Canada, he was the 22nd ranked goalie in terms of save percentage, and he was 19th in terms of goals against average. Keep in mind, this is with Team Canada in front of him. They still won their group, even with his foul play. And also, he ranked 22nd and 19th in those two stats. There were only 16 teams in the damn tournament. So it was an all-time bad international performance. And this season, it's not like he's rounded into form in any way, really. He's currently 54th in the NHL in save percentage. He's 52nd in goals against average in the NHL. So every time the US shoots, I'm going to be gritting my teeth. However, when it comes to in front net scrambles, when there's a rebound, when there's a bunch of chaos in the crease, honestly, I might take him over any other goalie because his competitive spirit kind of kicks in then, and it's more of a will to save the puck than it is his skill to save the puck. Bars. Didn't think of that preamble, just on the spot. Wow. But my point is, I think Binnington in this situation can use his clear intangibles to play a solid game because that's all we really need from him. And in that game 7 against Boston, in the biggest game of his life in TD Garden, where this game is going to be, he was freaking amazing in that game 7. And he also should be helped out by the fact that Canada's best defenseman by a mile will be playing in this game, and he didn't against the US in game 1. Him not being in that lineup, the importance of it cannot be overstated. Canada's blue line is really solid. It's not the US's, especially with the injuries to Pietrangelo and Theodore, but it's not dynamic whatsoever outside of Makar. So Canada against the US, it was going to be tough for them to generate offense through their back end because as much as I love Thomas Harley and, Drew Doughty, the corpse of Drew Doughty nowadays, they're not the offensive generators, even close to the offensive generators that Cale Makar are. Cale Makar is. I bet he plays around 30 minutes tomorrow night. I think he just hogs the ice. And his dynamic offensive ability combined with the Canadian top 6, that has to be the reason that Canada wins tomorrow night. Because the US flatly, as I've kind of gone over in this, has the better overall roster. I think their defense, like I said, is the best unit in the tournament. I think their depth is awesome on forward. I think they have the best goalie in the world. But Canada's X factor for that is their top 6 is easily the best in the tournament. So one stat that I like to use for line production is on ice times goal differential. It's a really basic stat. When you're on the ice, what's the goal differential in terms of percentages? So the McDavid line, which is one line, and the Crosby-McKinnon line, which is one line. Those have been the two stable things. Obviously, a bunch of pieces have moved throughout. Marner's gone from McDavid's line to the third line, and there's been a bunch of movement. But in general, McDavid line and Crosby-McKinnon line, those are the only lines with positive goal differential on ice in all 3 games they've played. And McKinnon and Crosby in general against the US, not in general, in particular against the US when they had Mark Stone on their line, they were at a .62 goal differential, which if you don't know that stat is really, really good. Like a 5 is awesome. A 6.2 or a .62 is like really, really good. So for this top 6 in the final, I would go Crosby, McKinnon, Stone because they were so good against the US before. And then I would go McDavid, Reinhart, Braden Point, who was awesome against Finland and clearly belongs in that top 6. If that's the top 6 or whatever the top 6 is, they have to play the game of their lives because I think 3 players Canada has are better than any one player the US has. Of course, I'm talking McDavid, who's been the best player in this tournament, best player in the world. McKinnon, who's the second best player in the world. And Makar, who's probably the third best player in the world. They have to be the shining stars. They have to be the reason why Canada brings the... Excuse me, disgusting. They have to be the reason why Canada brings the heat offensively. But this is the ultimate team game. I totally understand that. And the US has the better team. If Canada wants to win this game, McKinnon, Crosby, Makar have to be the 3 stars of this game. And I'm not talking 3 stars as in those are like the 3 guys to watch. I'm talking like finale, 3 stars of the game introduced after the game. Those are like the 3 guys. Also, what I think Canada needs is something people haven't been talking about, and that is a throwback performance from Brad Marchand. He has been, I don't want to say invisible this tournament, but he has been exceptionally quiet. We need him to be at his rattiest. We need him to go against the Kachuk brothers in the corners. We need him to be on Jacob Slavin in the corners. We need him to be the ultimate pest to try to throw the U.S. off their game. Because I think if both teams play their 100% perfect hockey, the U.S. probably takes it. Thing is about Canadian hockey, though, we really don't care what the odds are. It just always feels like we're going to pull through because hockey's ours. And I think that's what's going to happen on Thursday. I think Canada's top six is going to prevail. I think Cale Makar's return to the lineup is going to be monstrous in terms of the difference it makes between game one and this final game. And I think Canada pulls it out and wins the gold medal in men's hockey because that's what we do. Thank you all so much for watching. I apologize if my voice sounded like garbage throughout this entire video. I really didn't have a choice. The game's tomorrow night. I had to film something. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard today. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Spit Sports Show, just over 400 subscribers. Leave a comment. I love talking about sports with you guys. As always, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out. Love you guys.